Hey everybody, BTO Pro here. Today I'm going to go really deep into front-end development land, even beyond components. So I've been sleeping lately, which means I can finally learn again. And Kendall from Red Hat pointed this out to me as a project that they're working on. I started exploring, and then I quickly started freaking out about it. So at first pass, it just looks like it's a way of Red Hat managing their element library. So they're working on some components. You can see there's like an RH card. And then within that, it might be a little more unreadable than the ones I normally do, but this is kind of the future of web components, is that they're all doing class-based element definitions and then kind of just returning like, hey, this is the HTML to look for. And ultimately generating the same thing. You know, it still has slots, it still has CSS in it, but at the end of the day, you're going to have JS modules, which is script type module that kind of resolves everything. So at first glance, hey, cool, they've got those there. However, you dig into the tooling of what's actually going on here, and it gets pretty damn impressive. So RHElements, I've downloaded it, and I've been messing with it a bit. And so if we can look at the scripts, we see it has a thing called lerna, which allows them to manage everything as a monorepo. It's got Storybook integration built in, which I'll show what that is in a second. And it's got new, this command new. So we were messing around with new specifically to see what that does. So it's kind of a script that helps them generate their components. In the background here, I ran npm run storybook. So you start out, npm run storybook, sweet. So this is Storybook, if you haven't seen it before. It's a nice little element library organizer, if you will. And so it's providing all this wrapper to it. So I can click card. That's a bad example from what they have. I get to click date time. You see the example of what the element is here. Let's do call to action though. There we go. So call to action, so you can see a sample of it. And then down below, you get these things called knobs, which I can then apply different knobs to it, which is basically just tweaking properties that are spit into the DOM. So if we see here, tweak that, and you don't see it reflected, but it does rebuild the contents that are in here. And then I can dig into the shadow root, and we can see that it influences what's there. All right, cool. Why would I freak out about this? So, well, it's because I forked their generator script and extended it substantially. So the original generator script is really impressive. So npm run new. And when you do npm run new, it asks you, hey, do you want to make an element? And what's the name of the element? So their original invocation of this, it said, hey, let's make an element name. And so I'd say like, bto-pro. And so I started to add some input validation to it. So like if I did bto pro and maybe some other stuff, it would be, hey, you have to have hyphens, it has to be all lowercase. So just some minor stuff in here. This is Yeoman generator. Then it says, hey, who's the author? And say it's, well, we'll go with bto pro for this one. Now is where it starts to fork from what they originally did. So I really love the idea of what they're putting together. However, I think what it could be is just a component factory in general. So even, and I don't know, you know, I still have to talk to them about getting this work merged in, or if this is even within scope, or if it's not, then we're just going to fork the project and we're going to work on this now because this is crazy promising. But so basically, using entirely this command line, you can start writing well-documented elements that have a really clean build routine to them. And I say elements, I should say different styles of custom elements. So copyright owner, well, what I do is technically owned by Penn State. Hey, what license do you want to throw in? I prefer Apache 2, but you could throw in BSD 3 clause or MIT. Those are popular. Do you want to use Sass? This is something that they had in place. I'm going to say no. Oh, wow, this goes way out there. So this is going to be able to write vanilla RHElements, which are their form of custom elements, LitElements, and Polymer 3. Oh gosh, I'm so happy. So let's start with a vanilla element. Do you want to add custom properties to it? Yeah, no one likes typing, right? None of us like typing. And so we've got this loop, and maybe BTO Pro has a name. Let's go with first name. And first name is a string, and my first name initially is going to be Brian, because duh. I would like that to be reflected. I do want to notice changes on the property. Do I want to add another one? Absolutely, I do. Let's do last name. Whoops, that's going to be a string in this case. No, let's not reflect that. Let's not notice changes. Let's add another one. Age, that should be a number because age is really important. And we're going to say 54, even though that's not my age. No, yeah, I don't want to notice this property. You might say, what the hell is going on? That's really important. Items list, cool. Let's make that an array. And so perhaps you're seeing what the potential power of what the heck is going on here is. So is active. No, I'm really not active lately, but we'll just write false. Sure. So imagine that you go through the CLI and you are saying what your properties are. And then a whole ton of crap happens that is extremely detrimental to anyone getting involved in element building, which is why we originally got into Polymer, is because Polymer provided this lightweight tooling on top of what we were doing anyway, so that we can participate, quite frankly, because it's really cryptic, some of the APIs. And there's a lot of them. So if you're not familiar with them, then it's you kind of start to say to yourself, I just want to write HTML. So what I loved about the direction that their thing was going is that they've set in motion a ton of this stuff. So I'm just extending it a bit. So it created a new element, it threw it in here, it's BTO-pro, namespaced correctly. It then goes and it generates a demo page that should be able to view my this is BTO Pro element. It creates its own gulp file so that it can be done standalone. In fact, let's just dig into everything that this just did, because those few seconds are pretty critical here. So it is going in, demo, index, right? So it's setting in motion the ability to view this element as just a demo page, right? So there's your demo for a standalone repo. This is called a monorepo, their entire stack here, which means you manage all of your projects through it. However, these can easily be peeled off and tested independently, which is incredible. There's source, and we'll go to that. Yes, yeah. So when I filled out properties, I didn't write the properties into the object. What I did instead is I wrote them to a JSON file. So this is something you could update after the fact. This is everything camel cased appropriately, put in a format that is kind of like Polymer friendly, but it will work in other stuff. Then CSS is in its own file, rename space correctly. If you use Sass, it would import stuff from Sass based on their build routine. Then there's just btopro.html, which then has a slot tag, btopro.js, this is where we start getting more interesting. And so it created all of this. It took their original thing, which is the RHElements. It did a lot of this stuff just for the Red Hat element. But now this is a vanilla element. It has no dependencies, the thing that I am showcasing here. But it's just the source, because you'd say, you reference, I don't see what the template is, right? There has to be contents that get kicked out. So this is a really cool thing I found in their build routine, which is why I'm really interested in it. So if I go to bto-pro.js, this is the compilation of those other 4 files, effectively. So it's the JS file put down at first, then it takes the CSS file, puts it in this top area here, and then it takes the HTML file and puts it here. And then my extension, I add a properties object, which gets globbed on here. So now I've got default properties I can operate against. Down in the constructor for this tag, it will look for that properties function, and then magically, the properties I enter via the UI, I now have access to in my vanilla custom element. Now, this is pretty rough, for sure, but now, because of their tooling and the notices going, or they're just watching going on in the background, this is Storybook that noticed my BTO-pro. Oh, I forgot to mention, it also auto-authored all of the story file needed with widgets that are associated with the names of the variables that I plugged in. And so I effectively started to set in motion from that CLI a completely data-bound demo with the types correctly, because I said that that was a Boolean. I said that this is numerical, so it's a certain input. And while I'm still working on getting some of the tooling put in place to make sure it's updating my element, you can see it actually writing into the DOM here, right? So this isn't true to a data binding. It is it's you know, fake to a data binding because it's just updating the piece of the screen that's there. But super promising. All right, so you don't want one of those elements. You could use one of theirs. I'm going to do a lit test, and so now I'm going to. Oh, you see it overwrote my file. So there, it overwrote my fork of what I had previously. So you'll get what their element normally would be. And so if I reload this here, you'll see test. There we go. There's lit test. So there is their element that they would typically stamp out. If I search for lit test on my computer, I should be able to pull it up. Okay, there's lit test. And so it authored these files. That is what the normal behavior is. I have my own little fork of their generator repo. I'll make sure that it's put in place again. All right, so I've overwritten it on another window, which is literally just taking files and copying and pasting them. I don't want it to be magic. So now it's back on my generator, and so we'll do lit. Okay, there we go. Open state. No, I don't want to use Sass. Let's switch to a lit element. Custom properties. Sure, let's just do title, and that's a string. Lit is cool, and then we'll add another property that's just like number of times, and we'll make that number, and it's 23. Nope, yes, and exit. Okay, so what that is going to do is all of the same stuff as before. Again, this is super prototype phase, but it's going to add it in here, and now you see I have lit here. I've got my number of times, and it is cool, and 23, and in my source files for here, we've got something slightly different. So let's look at what lit is. Let me move the window, there we go. Lit is going to pull in lit as part of its build routine into this file, and I have this about where this leaves off with as far as that's concerned. I still have to clean it up some. However, lit does data binding into the DOM, and so I automatically generate examples of those things. And so we scroll down in this file, you can see it's the same exact creation routine. However, now in our HTML block, which lit uses a render function instead of an HTML template return, it's copying the CSS, it's copying the HTML, and then there's going to be data binding that is available to this element. Why are we doing this? Well, because quite frankly, there's a million different ways to successfully build these elements now. And so we're kind of saying, well, we probably should review all of these and just sort of do the one that makes the most, sense for whatever the job is. So if that's, Polymer 3, and you want all the things that Polymer 3 gets you, well, then make a Polymer 3 element. They're all compatible. If something else that's really, friendly to work with comes out in the future, or does a little bit more, or say we want to start to mix Angular into this, or Vue, or any of these other libraries, because they're all starting to, work, kind of plug and play at this layer, that we could do that. So just real quickly, Polymer rocks. Let's just add bool me, and we'll give it a boolean, no default value, don't do CSS reflection, notice changes, yes, no, okay. So then over on the side here, we got 3, there's poly 3, and so I need to talk to them to see if this is of any interest to their team, but it's pretty close to being something pretty stinking impressive already. Just in that it's taking these values, wiring them into the DOM, and if I can get these custom elements to load in this test bed. They are actually written correctly. It's just getting them to render correctly in this because I'm unfamiliar with the Webpack build routines in place. But we can see this just made a Polymer 3 element, and Poly 3 then brings in static properties, HTML template, and automatically generates a demo of how it would do the data binding for that. So we could, peel these items off. I could go through the source and I could just, manipulate this array or this object and have it influence via build routine downstream. The things that you create can be peeled off. The whole thing can be reviewed in one big, awesome little file here. I would have to rebuild the storybook settings, I believe, because those are generated dynamically. They're generated that first time. They're not a runtime type of a thing. There we go. But you could hopefully see the promise if I stop clicking on this one called BTO Pro that it gets mad at, of potentially doing this right. So if I had my lit elements next to my Polymer elements next to my Red Hat, my RHElements, this could be really, really powerful. We're also looking at how we could throw this into a container so that you could just kind of run one command and get this whole thing started and have no dependency tree. Would certainly be part of what I would be interested in. So still a lot of work to do on it, but this is kind of where we are as far as kicking this around. I say we, me and Michael Potter have been kicking this around for the last few days here. I have a fork of the generator, which I will keep working on, and Mike is also exploring to see how we're doing our, how we're actually templatizing and kicking those all out, or even down to seeing like, well, hey, how did you templatize the license? Well, it's the beauty of Yeoman. So yeah, hope this was of interest. If you want to help out or want to know how the heck any of this stuff works, I'm about 2 days ahead of you knowledge-wise, so I'm failing fast.